DC, and you're watching a special broadcast here on DD India. We're calling it The Race for the White House.
Yes, and good evening, viewers. I'm Sakal Bhatt, and it is election day in the United States, and we at DD India, our entire team, are bringing to you a 360-degree global and comprehensive coverage of the US elections. And on the show, in the next 2 more hours, we not only get you the top leading international voices on the elections, we'll get you live ground reportage from the action epicenter.
Absolutely. Now, viewers, we began our live coverage at 6 p.m. IST, so it's been 2 hours and counting now. For those of you who just tuned in, our coverage is complete with a distinguished panel of opinion makers and influencers from India and the US, and a full complement of reporters on the ground tracking every move by Trump and Biden.
Absolutely, Ramesh. And we at DD India, let's also tell our viewers, have made elaborate arrangements to keep you on the top of the news as it happens from USA. Here's all that we have lined up for you, just for you, whether you're joining us from India, you're joining us from Africa, you're joining us from Asia, Australia, or Europe for that matter, or for that matter, the Americans, who sure don't want to miss even a bit of it.
All right, so let's get started. All right, so let's get started. Here are the headlines, US election headlines this hour. Voters are casting their ballots across America to pick up their president, either Republican Trump or Democrat Biden. Polling picks up all across the country as tens of millions have already voted either early or through the mail.
And to win the presidency, either Trump or Biden must acquire over 50% of the electoral college vote of 538, a minimum of 270 electoral votes needed to clinch the presidency.
Joe Biden continues to lead Donald Trump in the national opinion polls. If elected, he'd be the oldest president in US history at 78. Trump would also be the oldest president ever if he wins a second term. He is currently 74.
And DD India gets you extensive coverage of US presidential polls like never ever before. Get all news, views and analysis on just one platform, that is DD India, and its all social media handles.
All right, so we'll be joined by our colleagues Kate Fisher in Washington, D.C., William Denslow in Wisconsin, and Nick Harper in Delaware. Now, Kate is tracking Trump and his campaign. She'll follow Trump wherever he goes and keep a close eye on everything that happens in the Trump camp. And we'll be going across to Kate momentarily. Now, William is in Wisconsin, a state that turned from blue to red in 2016. Which way will it vote this time round? We'll find out from William in Wisconsin. And Nick is in Delaware tracking Biden and his campaign. Now, Delaware is Biden's home state.
Absolutely. And to add to that, we will be in a very short while from now joined by a distinguished panel of guests joining us on the show. We will be, in fact, getting live on this show Ambassador Arun Singh. He's going to be with us in any moment from now. He is, of course, former Indian ambassador to United States of America, as well as France and Israel. On the show also will be joined by from US is Professor W.P.S. Sidhu. Professor Sidhu is at the New York University School of Professional Studies. Ramesh, also on the show from United States, where the action is as we speak, will be Puneet Ahluwalia, who needs no introduction, an Indian-American businessman and a member also of the Republican Party, to get a perspective what's happening at the Republican camp, as well as Preeti Upala, a California-based geopolitical analyst as well as columnist, will be on the show in any moment. So the action is building up.
Absolutely. Also joining us will be 3 more guests. Professor Sriram Cholia, Professor K.P. Vijayalakshmi, and Dhruv Jaishankar. Now, Professor Cholia is the Dean at the Jindal School of International Affairs, and Professor Vijayalakshmi is with the School of International Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, and Dhruv Jaishankar is the Director, U.S. Initiative as the Observer Research Foundation. Now, the ORF is a privately funded think tank headquartered in New Delhi.
In fact, Kate is going to be with us in a moment from now, but Ambassador saying, let me start the discussion.
Sure.
Ambassador, thank you so much. In fact, all our guests at this hour, thank you so much. Really honored to have such a distinguished and high-powered panel with us. Initial thoughts, there's a palpable excitement on ground, absolutely no doubt about it. And the unprecedented voter turnout that we saw running into millions and millions. Should Trump camp be a little nervous as we speak?
Going by the experience of 2016, I think both the Trump and Biden camps should be nervous at this stage.
Okay.
Most public opinion polls show that Biden is in lead, and a comfortable lead of 8 to 10%. But Hillary Clinton in 2016 was in a similar lead, about 6%. So Trump's lead is, Biden's lead is a little more. But despite that, Trump was able to pull off the election because the US electoral process, as you mentioned in your comments, is determined not so much by the overall voting at the national level, but what happens at the state-by-state elections and who wins which state, and therefore how does the electoral college add up. And I remember in 2016, around 16th October, and the elections were in early November, soon after the third debate with Hillary Clinton had ended, there was a sense that Hillary Clinton was winning. But after that, the FBI director came out with a statement that he was restarting investigation into Clinton's use of a private server for official emails. That started changing the mood. And Trump went into a vigorous campaign in the last few weeks of the elections, focusing on the battleground states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, which were historically Democratic. And he was able to turn them around. And with that, he was able to turn around the results in that election. Now, at this stage, Biden is in the lead. Most statistics, most polls suggest that he should win, not just at the national level, but the state-by-state level. At the same time, in the last couple of weeks, especially after he came out of hospital, Trump has brought in a lot of energy to his campaign. And he's traveled to different parts of the country. He's attracted the huge rallies. So we have to see how it plays out. Ultimately, it's a question of who is able to rally the base, how many voters turn out. Both camps are making a determined effort. And you'd have seen reports that already 100 million people in the United States have cast their votes. That's more than 2/3 of those who had cast the votes in the entire elections in 2016.
Right.
So there is tremendous mobilization. And we'll have to see how this all plays out. And then also there are people are planning legal challenges to vote count, both camps. And so it's going to be complicated.
Professor Sidhu, let's hear from you. You're joining us from the US. Now, put this into the right perspective and context for viewers here in India and around the world. Now, every election is significant, no doubt. But why is this election so crucial and significant? One, for the US, two for India, and three for the world at large?
Me? Delighted to be here, and thank you very much for having me.
Welcome,
and
Professor.
I think that's a very important and pertinent question. And I would argue that there are three reasons, perhaps four, if you include COVID-19, why this election is particularly exceptional. First of all, it's the turnout. As Ambassador Arun Singh just mentioned, the pre-poll turnout has already crossed 100 million. And it's estimated that the final turnout is probably going to be something like 67% of the electorate, those who have the right to vote, about 240 million, which would be the highest ever recorded, certainly in the last century or so. The only time which was higher than this was in 1908. So that already is a very significant factor. As you know, there's really a lot of mobilization. People are very, very energized, even in states which are not necessarily in play for example, New York as well. The second is that this is by far the most expensive election that
Absolutely.
the US has ever witnessed. So today, the cost of this election, not just the presidential, but all the other races, is estimated at $14 billion, not million, $14 billion. And what's remarkable is this is more than double what was spent in the last election, which brought Donald Trump to power in 2016.
Yes.
And the bulk of this money, interestingly, has gone to the Democrats. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will translate into votes.
Absolutely.
But that is an important and crucial element of that. And I think the third reason why this election is going to be very different than the others is the International Crisis Group just put out a report last week warning of post-election violence. And this, for a country, a mature democracy like the United States, is almost unprecedented.
All right.
So I think precisely for that reason as well, there's actually great concern that particularly if the result is contested, if it's not a clear mandate or a clear landslide, then you may actually see some degree of post-election violence as well.
And there is also a sense
of all, of course,
absolutely.
You have COVID-19, which has posed such a big challenge to the running of the whole hustings as well. So it is an exceptional election for all of those reasons.
In fact, there's a lot of speculation, even post-election results. There could be a sense of unwillingness to accept from either camps, whatever the result is. In fact, Kate Fisher is with us, joining us live from Washington, D.C., the epicenter of very action. Kate, it's breezy, it's beautiful morning over there. Palpable excitement. In fact, we really envy you for you being there. The sense from the Trump camp. Over to you.
Yeah, here I am outside the White House in Washington, D.C., where Donald Trump will shortly be leaving. He is going to visit his campaign headquarters in Northern Virginia, but a bit of a rest for him today, really, because he spent the last few weeks crisscrossing this country, desperately trying to shore up those votes that he won in 2016. He's been trailing Joe Biden, his opponent, in the polls consistently throughout this campaign. So he has, despite those few days off when he was in hospital with coronavirus, he has been holding rallies all over the country. Of course, rallies and being in front of a big crowd of his supporters are what really motivate and energize Donald Trump. And it also energizes his supporters, and he's going to have to rely on that energy as we head into the rest of today and start getting some results back, because so far, if the polls are to be believed, he needs something of a miracle to happen today. He needs a lot of people to go out to their polling stations and vote for him if he is to close the gap between him and Joe Biden.
Are the people out there, very briefly, Kate, accepting this gap? Has the Trump camp almost conceded the sentiment that we are trying to understand from you? We cannot jump the gun, we cannot really speculate, but what's the sense that you are getting, and how serious is the threat of violence, Kate?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?
How serious is the threat of violence there? And Trump camp, have they conceded this nervousness? Because you're talking about bridging the gap and some miracle can actually save Trump.
Yeah, so the threat of violence is a concern for many. I'm surrounded here at the White House by fences that have been erected. There's a church here, a hotel there. There are shops, cafes, restaurants that are all being boarded up in this area of Washington, D.C. because there is concern that whichever way this result goes, that supporters of the person that hasn't won or supporters of the person that has won feel the need to come here and perhaps make their message heard in a violent or something that causes public unrest. So there certainly is concern, and Donald Trump has not played down the idea of using some kind of for his supporters to make their voices heard. He has certainly in the past encouraged some violent responses, and he hasn't been saying that in recent days, but there is concern that if he seems to be doing badly on election night, he will suggest that it is a fraudulent reason, that there has been some kind of election tampering because of these early votes that have been posted in. Of course, they are completely legal. There is no evidence of any kind of widespread fraud, but he appears to be sowing the seeds of doubt in Americans' minds about the validity of some of these votes. It's almost though, although on stage when he's campaigning he says that he is looking forward to victory and that he's winning and he's doing brilliantly, he's also trying to get a kind of suggesting that what will happen if he doesn't win.
Okay.
He's trying to lay
That's
those seeds of doubt.
Kate, let's talk a bit, if you will, about the Trumps now. Where is the Trump family now as we speak? Have you heard from them yet this morning? And also, what do we know about whether they've voted or not?
Well, we don't have any information about where all the members of his family are. We're only given the solid information about the president's movements, and we know he's going to see his campaign headquarters in Northern Virginia this morning.
Yes.
Yes, we understand that all members of the Trump family have voted. We assume they have all voted for President Trump. They have all been, most of his adult children, that is, have been very busy on the campaign trail for him. They've been his surrogates, sending his message into states where he's campaigning elsewhere. They have held events, particularly Ivanka Trump, his daughter, and Don Jr., one of his sons, very, very busy on the campaign trail. Don Jr. often also appearing on cable news here to expound his father's message and to try to drum up more support. This is very much a family operation, this White House.
So we'll leave it at that,
Okay.
Kate, and we'll keep coming back to you for more over the next 2 days as well. Do keep an eye out for the Trump campaign and stay on the news, and we'll come back to you for more. Thank you.
In fact, we're also getting to pick more information from there. The Trump has, as we speak, has visited RNC Annex in Virginia. In fact, our correspondent there also just confirmed that, and we believe we have the shots there, and we can in fact try and dip in live. In the meanwhile,
Indeed.
we will try and connect with the other set of distinguished panelists who will be with us in a moment. But Ramesh, you know, you've closed.
In fact, just on a programming note, viewers,
Yes.
do tweet to us. The hashtag is flashing on the top right-hand corner of your screens. It's hashtag Raise for White House, and the DD India Live Twitter handle is there for you to see as well. So please send us your news, views, and everything, all your comments to us at that hashtag and our Twitter handle. And you can also watch us live on YouTube as we speak.
Yes, and I've been told Preeti Upala, in fact, joins us live all the way from California. She's a California-based geopolitical analyst. Thank you so much, Preeti. Yes, she's there with us, and we continue to have Professor Vijayalakshmi with us, and also we have
Also joining us
Puneet
is
Alwal.
Puneet Ahluwalia.
Yes.
So we have a power-packed panel for this segment of the discussion. So let's welcome all our guests once again on this special broadcast. If I can come to you, Professor Vijayalakshmi, you've been with us, waiting patiently by all these minutes. Now, talking about these, disconcerting reports coming in from the U.S. as we speak, that the Republican camp might be reluctant to accept the results of the election if it goes against them, and a threat of violence as well. We are told the White House has been boarded up as we speak to prevent any untoward incident. What does that tell you about the state? I mean, how polarizing could this election get?
Well, I would say that this is a two-party system, tends to lean towards polarization, even on any election, because clearly the positions of both the parties on major issues will be different. There would be personality differences as well, very many other things. I mean, I have never subscribed to the view that both parties in the United States are Tweedledum and Tweedledee, which is what I used to be told when I was much younger, but that's not true. And I think there is a keen contest. But as you know, there are a number of races that the US electorate keeps voting on. So this polarization, as you call it, is also partisanship. That is, you identify either as a Democrat or as a Republican or as an independent or undecided. So, you know, there are many categories in which you can place yourself. But the main thing is to be convinced enough that this election matters to the issues you care about, and therefore you would go in and vote. And that seems to be the case in this election. And I fully agree with what Sidhu has said, because, you know, and I'm really delighted that he's also here on this panel after a long time.
Absolutely.
It's been really a pleasure also to see the other panelists.
Yes.
But really, I think polarization has been going on for quite some time. And I would trace it back to Clinton's time, in fact, and, you know, divided government. That is what we all learned about Congress being in one party's hands and the presidency in another party's hands. And so this polarization and the debates about polarization is not new. Why is this time so very peculiar? And I think the reason is this constant refrain of the Trump administration saying, or of President Trump saying that, you know, there is a lot of fraud, election fraud.
Okay.
This can be a stolen election.
Okay.
This can be a election in which, you know, there will be manipulation. These are not things that we had heard about, even though there have been legal challenges. And, you know, there is, the system itself allows till December 14th. For, you know, in the olden days, you had to ride, you had, you know, the communications. And all
If
that.
I may come in for
So
a
the main
second,
point I'm
Professor
making is there was
Vijayalakshmi.
enough time
Yes,
from November
you know, you
3rd to
flagged that
14th
very
for
pertinent
all
point of
kinds
this intense
tallying
polarization,
and
ma'am.
counting and canvassing and processing and everything, checking the votes. And of course, it's normal, you know, you verify signatures,
Okay.
you do that. But time and again, almost all of the reports are saying there is no basis for this claim of large-scale fraud or
Okay.
mail manipulation of mailed-in votes or any of those postal ballots. So why is then this fear leading to violence? I think that goes deeper. It goes back to the other issue apart from COVID pandemic, which I think is one of the fundamental reasons why this election is so unique. The social unrest that we saw for the last few months. This is not just about Black Lives Matter. It's also about an issue of law and order.
Okay.
It is about the violence that you saw on the streets, and also about the kind of justice that people expect when somebody fires into a protester's crowd, whether that person is going to be put in jail, not put, will the law take its own course? So there is this constant worry about whether you can protest about what is happening to you. So this violence that you're seeing as a fear of actually just the election result has a deeper root. And
Yes.
that unrest, social unrest, might be one of the reasons why you're seeing such a strong reaction from white supremacist groups, which are calling for all kinds of action. And, you know,
All right.
there will be a
I want to
reaction
quickly
that
get in this
according to people
one
pointing
reaction
back
from
to the,
somebody who is the member
movement.
of the Republican Party himself. I'm talking about Punit Ahluwalia, who is joining us live on this broadcast from United States of America, Indian-American businessman. This whole narrative of violence, in fact, attached to these elections. And as I ask my question, let me also welcome Dr. Sriram Cholia on our broadcast, author and distinguished professor from Opijindal University, expert in international relations. Thank you very much. And Ambassador Singh continues to be with us. Preeti is there with us, and so is Professor Sidhu. Yes, Puneet, over to you now. This whole narrative of too much of violence, this narrative of not really having that acceptance. I'm talking about the Trump camp, and no matter the kind of aggressive debates we have seen from both camps, you would agree that it has been a COVID-dominated election discourse. And well, numbers speak for themselves. US is at the top of the list, continues to be at the top of the list when it comes to the worst affected nations, or perhaps the containment of it. We may agree or we may not. What is your take on it, and how is Republican camp dealing with it, the COVID containment?
First thing is, I've been part of the Republican Party for the last 20 years and proud of my association with the party. And now I'm running for Lieutenant Governor of Virginia.
Yes.
And I announced my candidacy almost 3 months ago. I would say very clearly, all this hype has been created by CNN and the media and the social media promoters, Twitter, Facebook, who are part of the whole takedown strategy of success of what President Trump has achieved in the last 4 years. And the rioting and looting was funded by the Democratic Party through their organization called Antifa and funded by many other people, like Soros is one to be precise. It is they who are doing it in their blue cities with blue mayors and police associations controlled by them. This is not the Republican, and this nonsense about that President Trump has supported the white supremacists. I am campaigning in rural Virginia, 5th and 7th district. I am brown, I am nowhere white. I don't have the white privilege. And that's all nonsense fed by CNN just to keep showing the systemic racism. It is basically the Democratic Party's failed policies for many years. President Biden's 47 years in Senate has showed the failure, what the Democrats could not do for the large minority population, unfortunately for the African-American population. And those failed school system, the opportunity for them to keep passing off. And when they came to the real life, they could not get the real job. And guess what? They couldn't find anything to do. So their role models were basically people who were drug dealers or drug peddlers or gangs. Hence the reason they are frustrated and disappointed. But President Trump changed all of that. We had the highest unemployment in the African-American community and the Hispanic community. And most importantly, President Trump took on the COVID issue right from the beginning. It was Vice President Biden who said, no, there's no virus and you're being harsh on China. But President Trump called out, while in February itself, to stop the travel ban from China. And you have Governor Cuomo from a Democratic state of New York saying, we thank President Trump for giving us all the resources needed to fight the COVID. They have made this into a COVID war because President Trump's economy, the economy of the United States, was humming and thriving and churning at a great speed. You can see earlier this month, a few days ago, last week, we had a 33% growth in the United States job and GDP.
Puneet, hold your thought. We'll come back to you momentarily. I'll also ask my other guests, Preeti and Professor Cholia, to bear with us for a few more minutes. We have to cut live and go across to our colleague William Denslow, who is standing by in Wisconsin as we speak. William, good to have you join us on this special broadcast. Now, Wisconsin. Now, let's talk a bit about Wisconsin, where you are now. How crucial is Wisconsin for the pathways of the two contenders, President Trump and his challenger, Joe Biden? Give us a flavor of the campaigning and the polling taking place in Wisconsin as we speak.
Absolutely, plenty to unpack. And of course, what we saw in 2016 is the pivotal role that states like Wisconsin played in the outcome of the presidential election. Now, Wisconsin brings with it 10 electoral college votes. Of course, 270 is the benchmark that both candidates will need to cross that threshold to become the next president. So that figure of 10 electoral college votes is not the same amount of somewhere like Pennsylvania that's getting plenty of attention that brings with it 20 electoral college votes, for example. But considering the fact that when it comes to it, if it is indeed a tight election, that these states like Wisconsin could play an absolutely monumental role. We saw back in 2016, Donald Trump won the state of Wisconsin by less than 23,000 votes, so such a small margin of victory. It was the first time that Republicans had won the state of Wisconsin in a presidential race since 1988. So that just shows how much is at stake. And I think what signifies that is the fact that the penultimate campaign rally that President Trump made yesterday here in the United States was here in Wisconsin. That just shows the value that he is certainly putting on Wisconsin. You mentioned the polls. Well, according to a Siena College New York Times poll released a few days ago, it showed that Joe Biden was up by around 11 points. However, speaking to his supporters in Kenosha, Wisconsin, the message from President Trump is that the polls were wrong in 2016. He hopes they're wrong yet again this time around.
William, in 2016, we saw that Hillary Clinton did not campaign at all in Wisconsin. Now, cut to 2020, has Joe Biden made amends for that?
Well, 2016 was seen as an absolutely huge omission as far as the Democrats are concerned, and what many will tell you within the party is that they did in fact ultimately pay the price for that. Now, Joe Biden has made some appearances here in the state of Wisconsin, but the campaign strategies from both presidential hopefuls is very different. For months, we've been seeing President Trump making frequent trips to Wisconsin, holding these large-scale rallies. Joe Biden, former vice president, in contrast, making far more smaller, socially distanced type events to his supporters. Of course, let's not forget that the Democrats chose here in the city of Milwaukee, the biggest city in Wisconsin, choose for their national convention. That was really seen as a strong message to Democratic voters that they are making a real push for Wisconsin. They acknowledged what happened in 2016 and they would not be making the same mistake again. Of course, COVID-19 had a huge role to play. That convention was moved pretty much entirely remotely and virtually, so that is seen as a blow for Democrats, but at least that message of intent was there. The message from Democrats, they're hoping that that will now resonate with voters.
But Williams, why is there a lot of uncertainty attached this time around to these results? Well, there are already speculations doing rounds, William, that this may take long and it may get into a legal tangle, and Trump's camp would not accept the defeat, and maybe the poll pundits' predictions so far, giving that slender lead to Biden, could be flawed, and that is something which is adding to a lot of uncertainty. No matter how much we say that Biden is leading, but it could happen the other way also.
Absolutely. So first of all, if we take a look at Wisconsin, so under the laws of this particular state, of course, different states have different laws when it comes to election day. That is important to note. Now, despite the fact that more than half of the state's registered voters have voted early, however, in Wisconsin, those votes can only start to be counted as of 7 a.m. local time on November 3rd, traditional election day here in the United States. That means that we are expecting, according to pollsters here and those in charge of the election commission here, they're estimating that it could be between the hours of 3 a.m. 6 a.m. local time in Wisconsin before we start seeing results from major cities such as Milwaukee come through. So we're certainly not expecting an early call for Wisconsin. It could be potentially as early as tomorrow morning until we start to see results like Wisconsin come through. However, the Supreme Court made a decision here in the state that any ballots that are received after 8 p.m. tonight on election day will not be counted. That comes after Democrats had wanted up to 6 days leeway for those absentee ballots to be registered and to be allowed to count if they were postmarked by November 3rd, election day. So that will make the voting process a little smoother, or will certainly allow the voting process to come through quicker here in Wisconsin. However, as you so rightly mentioned, that's not the case in other states like Pennsylvania that have a little bit longer to be able to calculate those absentee ballots, which is why we might not expect an overall winner in this presidential race on election night.
And talking about very quickly, William, about the swing states, the Rust Belt, Wisconsin, Michigan. Now, all these states turned from blue to red in 2016. Talking about the 2020 election campaign, how do you rate the chances of the Democrats to wrest these states from the Republicans?
Well, of course, what we're seeing in the polls is that it's not just the state of Wisconsin that shows Biden with a lead. If these polls are certainly to be believed, the likes of Michigan, the likes of Pennsylvania also seem to be in Joe Biden's favor. But of course, those polls were so wrong in 2016. Rural America will be a hugely crucial part for President Trump. He'll be hoping for a strong turnout today on election day to make sure he gets over the line once again.
All right, on that note, William Denslow in Wisconsin, thank you so much for joining us on this special broadcast. Appreciate it. And Sakal, we're getting news as we're getting the news from the US that Melania Trump would actually be voting in West Palm Beach, Florida as we speak. So we'll get you all the latest from that front as well. But if I can we go back to our guests?
Yes.
If I ask the producers to go back to our guests, Preeti and Professor Cholia.
Yes.
And if I could start with you, Preeti, if I could begin by asking, have you voted already, or are you looking forward to actually casting your vote? All right, I'm told we are getting these visuals of Melania Trump as we speak. These are the live visuals coming to you of Melania Trump going to cast her votes in West Palm Beach, Florida.
Yes.
Now, Florida is a crucial state, mind you, viewers. It has 29 electoral votes at stake, and it could decide the winner of the 2020 US presidential election. We are seeing these live pictures of Melania Trump walking to cast a vote in Florida. Sakal?
Yes, the incumbent first lady of the United States of America, and our research team telling us that she's already cast her ballot and now she's walking out of the Palm Beach, Florida. And I'm sure as we speak, the world is watching watching her and trying to read her body language, trying to maintain her nerve and cool. And in fact, I think she's smiling at the cameras. Will she speak? We'll have to see. As we stay with these live visuals, let's quickly get in a quick word from Preeti Upala as well as Sriram Chole. But Preeti, coming to you, thank you so much for waiting patiently as we stay live with these visuals. Preeti, very quickly, the whole Kamala Harris factor, Preeti, has it actually cut ice with the electorate of America this time around? Simple.
Well, namaste, Sakal, and namaste to your wonderful audience. Thank you for having me on your show. Pleasure to be here. This is the most crucial election in US history, and the whole world is watching because what happens will affect the whole world at large on a larger geopolitical point of view because of what's shaping up, and there's a very clear divide of, let's say the big rogue actors out there, and obviously China is one of them, and then you've got the rest of the world. You've got the Western liberal democracies, and of course you've got a great country like India too. So a strong U.S. administration that has great foreign policy vis-a-vis India becomes very important. I will touch on the point you made, the question you asked me about Kamala Harris. So it sadly not quite, because for two reasons. One, as far as the Indian American diaspora is concerned, look, I'm so happy that we've gone beyond the point of just looking at somebody's last name or skin color and realizing that they're Indian to think that they are going to be good for us. We have seen in the past some of the Congress men and women who happen to be of Indian origin have not actually been very in line with some of the domestic issues back home in India, and they have not supported this current Modi government. And on issues like whether it's 370 or CAA or NRC, they unfortunately don't understand the needs that India is, a sovereign country and needs no interference into its internal matters. So when you look at someone like Kamala Harris, you don't get that sense that she's going to really respect that. The Trump administration, the best thing that they've done is to stay out of Indian politics. That's more than what we can ask for. So the diaspora here is very mixed. It's quite split. There is quite a large faction who are not happy with the Democratic Party in general because of the stance that they've taken towards India, being a little antagonistic, while not calling out terrorism and other rogue elements in the neighborhood, which does affect us. It's affecting us in so many ways. That's one thing. And then the other issue is the African American community themselves are not that thrilled with Kamala Harris either, considering she, during her time as the AG over here in California, they, a lot of African American people were locked up for very, very menial crimes, so to speak. So I think that her own community also is not that thrilled. And then the whole race issue. I mean, is she Indian? Is she black? Is she Jamaican? She keeps changing her race by the minute. And none of these things actually fly. This is a very, very important election. And
you've covered a lot of ground there, Preeti. We'll come back to you in just a bit. But if I can, Professor Cholia, do stay on. We'll come to you in just a bit. But I want to go across to Ambassador Singh once again on this broadcast. Ambassador Singh, let's talk a bit, if you will, about the issues at play here, be it race, immigration, gun law, economy, China, foreign policy. Help our viewers understand which are these crucial issues that could tilt or decide the fate of the election one way or another.
Elections in the US are determined more by domestic issues. In fact, if you saw the two debates that were held between Joe Biden and President Trump, both of them focused largely on domestic issues. issues related to healthcare, how COVID has been handled, issues related to Affordable Care Act, the kind of insurance support, including from the state, that would be available to people, especially with pre-existing conditions, and issues related to the economy. Because especially under the impact of COVID, there has been huge unemployment. There has been a negative rate of growth in the US. Till January, before COVID impacted, the US economy was doing very well, and unemployment was at historically low levels. But since then, the situation has turned, and there is a hope that it's a V-shaped, not a K-shaped, and not a W-shaped kind of recovery, which goes up and down. But so the people largely are concerned about these issues, the kind of jobs they would get. President Trump has also played up some foreign policy issues in the context of the elections, notably China, because he wants to project that the impact of COVID has been because China held and hid information related to the disease, how it was spreading, and therefore US was not able to control. And he's doing that in a sense to cover the failure of his own administration, which was not able to effectively contain the spread of the disease. More than 9 million people in the US have been affected, and almost 250,000 people have died. And this is the highest level in the world. And the Democrats are using that, and in a sense related to that, the dysfunction of the Trump administration, to criticize them heavily. So that's a very important aspect that is in play. And so President Trump brings in China in that framework. He is also trying to address the issues related to jobs by bringing in China, saying that there has been unemployment in the US because jobs shifted away to China under the globalization that was pursued by previous administrations in the US. And he wants to also blame the Obama administration and as a result, Vice President Biden for being part of a process that led to jobs moving away from the US elsewhere. In fact, it was as a result of this that almost 40% of the population of the US, which saw that it was losing jobs, its wages were stagnating, death rates were going up, drug addiction was happening, that they came out and voted heavily for President Trump in 2016. So these are some of the main challenges and issues that have come up, and challenge related to race. Yes. Because the race-related issues in the US have become very prominent over the past years, and in the past few months, you've seen reports of violence in the United States as a result of that. There has been talk of systematic racism in the police in the manner that they have treated African Americans and people of color as compared to the white population. President Trump has held back from outright criticizing what are described as the white nationalist groups, and that's being played up because especially the white population in the US has a fear that as a result of increased immigration in the United States over a period of time, their control over the processes in the United States is coming down. Okay. And that therefore their power, their access to economic resources could come down. Because as you can see, the Republican Party is also making a very determined effort to prevent full voting from taking place. They're challenging the votes that are being cast. And that is whole part of the process that the minority groups somehow be kept away.
Yes, because Trump's legacy, and you, in fact, have been India's envoy to US, and I'm sure you've observed subsequent US elections from Barack Obama to Trump and now this. Very clearly, what could be the reasons for this elections, which has actually seen many firsts and undoubtedly extremely vitriolic in nature? I mean, perhaps one of those rare US elections, would you say, that's going to have a larger impact on the world?
No, I think each US election has an impact on the world because the US is the strongest power. The decisions taken in the US impact on all of us, whether we agree with them, whether we accept them, we have to work our way around them. So each of the elections does have consequences. In 2000, for example, whether it would be Bush being elected or Al Gore elected would have had consequences. But I think this time, because there has been tremendous polarization in US society and deep divisions on issues. For example, if you take COVID, normally if there was a pandemic, the US would have led the world for a global coordinated response. This time, President Trump's policy has been of America first. America should do things on its own and not work through a coordinated global process or a multilateral process. So it's become every country for itself. And earlier, for example, when there was a challenge of Ebola, the US had led a coordinated global response. So there is a consequence and there's a division related to that. There are deep divisions in the US related to how to handle healthcare, how to address issues related to race. So there is significant polarization, and President Trump, many have argued, has tried to use polarization to ensure that his base remains with him so that his chances of getting re-elected are better.
Yes,
and it's because of that that I think both sides fear that they may feel a little bit of disempowerment if the man they back loses the race.
Yes.
Right. I'll ask all our guests to stay on. The U.S. election process is very complex. So let's take a moment to understand in some detail how a president is actually elected in the U.S. Now, my colleague Anil Thomas joins us from the Newspit. Over to you, Anil.
Well, thank you, Sakal, and thank you, Ramesh. There, this particular election is going to be a sleepless night for everyone.
Absolutely.
Sleepless night because America decides and the world waits. Let's now take a look on how this particular elections or how exactly a U.S. president is elected. What exactly happens? A state-based system, not popular vote, decides the winner. This is very important when it comes to the electoral college system. Every state has a group of electors who are chosen by political parties. Once again, a clear system here where each of the 50 states get electoral votes based on population size. What exactly happens is that all the 50 states have one vote when it comes to population size.
Right, Anil, hold your thoughts. So we're getting these live visuals once again of Joe Biden interacting with his constituents as we speak. Let's listen in.
Two families for I don't know how many years now. And so they had me sign years ago up in the third floor where my Aunt Gertie lived. They had me sign my name. They just had me sign it behind a picture in the living room. So, but I'm afraid it's attracting a lot of people to their home.
Have you talked to President Trump today, sir?
Yes, I have.
You have? Sir?
Have I talked about...
Have you talked to President Trump today or his team?
Oh, no, I thought you said you talked about my son today. I beg your pardon. No, I haven't talked to President Trump today.
What advice will your son give you?
Thank you. I'm going to look for it.
All right, so we're watching these live visuals from Scranton of Joe Biden continuing with his election campaign, even as the U.S. goes to the polls across the country. Now let's go back to my colleague Anil in the Newspit. Anil.
Well, Pennsylvania is a place from where Biden has come to vote. That's his hometown, and he's losing no ground, especially trying to make inroads into that particular stronghold. And it's going to be a tipping point in this particular election, especially when it comes to Pennsylvania. It's got 20 seats there, 20 electoral votes, and it's going to be crucial, especially when it all boils down to that one particular state. Remember, Pennsylvania, the votes don't come out that easily. It's going to be Thursday or even Friday when the election results will be out. So it's going to be crucial. And Joe Biden there once again, his last home run that he's doing in that particular state of Pennsylvania. Well, coming back to the presidential election, how it goes about, the electoral college systems, at least 7 most popular states, Alaska, Delaware, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont and Wyoming have 3 electoral votes each. There are also states which have a maximum number of votes, which are very crucial in this particular elections, especially the electoral college system. The president candidates compete to win electoral college votes. The magic number is 270. Any candidate that wins 270 wins this particular election out of the 538 college votes. Candidate who wins the popular vote in a state gets all the electoral votes in that particular state. So it's crucial there. All the candidates at this point of time trying to get that particular point. The total number of electoral votes, that's 538. Up for grabs in this particular college. The electoral college has 538 votes up for grabs. The magic number that both Biden as well as Trump is looking for is 270. Any candidate that wins 270 or more particular votes wins this particular election. Is it going to be a repeat of Trump there in the White House, or is Biden going to come and surprise everyone? It's a battle between red and blue. We'll see as the map comes out how things go. A projected winner, what happens? How is the president elected? A projected winner is announced on the election night. This time around, we don't know when that particular night is going to be. In the event of an electoral college, the House will decide a winner. This is how the president is elected there, the electoral college system that's been explained to you. Now, which are the important dates, when it comes to this particular election? The important date number 1, November 3rd, that's today, where United States of America presidential election takes place. But the numbers are going to come in slowly this time around. Another important date, December 14, 2020, electorates vote in their particular states. An important date, 2 important dates in this particular elections. December 3rd, Jan 6, 2021, the Congress counts the electoral votes. That's when you get a much clearer picture on who holds power in the Congress. And January 20, 2021 at noon, the inauguration day, or when the new president swears in. This time around, it's going to be pretty crucial because there are many particular states, especially 6 states of the 12 that have been fiercely fought. That's Arizona, Florida, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and North Carolina. So it's going to be an interesting next few days or next few nights, as many put it, as somebody put it perfectly on a newspaper heading today. It's going to be United States of anxiety, especially over the next few nights or next few days or even next few weeks. But we all got to hold our breath together.
Absolutely.
Because we're going to see history in the making, and it's going to be history that we're all going to bring it together live on DD India.
Yes.
Indeed.
Over to you, Sakal and Ramesh.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Let's quickly, Ramesh, in fact, go to Professor Cholia. It's been waiting very, very patiently. I'm sure you heard my colleague Anil Thomas elaborating on how these elections happen in United States of America. Very quickly, Professor Cholia, what we want to know from you, the legacy of Donald Trump marred by Russian election interference. I mean, besides the good things, the governance points, we are not speculating here. Pandemic shutdowns, the whole China thing that he's been talking about during his campaigning, the contentious immigration policies, Russian election interference, all that and much more. For the Trump campaign and for the Biden campaign, the issues have been extremely divergent in nature. And many poll pundits and American experts have been writing about the fact that this has not been a really issue-based election. This is focused much on coronavirus, the mishandling of it. What's your assessment? Whatever is the result, what do you think has been the most rallying point for Trump to retain his seat?
Well, I think, Sakal, definitely for Trump, he's an anti-establishment. He continues to say that Biden represents the corrupt liberal establishment. He has been in politics for 47 years and he did nothing. And Trump has positioned himself still as an outsider. And even though he's in power, he says, for example, in this campaign, he has gone on a relentless attack against what he calls a big tech, big media, Silicon Valley mafia, because he thinks that there is a liberal conspiracy of elites to suppress people and their will. That is the basis of his populism. So that is actually his ultimate legacy, and whether he gets a second term or bows out after one, the fact is he could create this notion that there is the people versus the establishment.
Okay.
And he's still appealing on that basis, for the votes. Until the last moment, he's saying, I'm not a typical politician. I came from nowhere. I was a businessman. And, the career politicians, what we call the Beltway in Washington, D.C., I am from outside, and I am here to what he calls drain the swamp. The problem for Trump is, it had a greater appeal, this fiery anti-establishment populism in 2016, when he was untested. He came from nowhere, and suddenly, like a meteor, he rose to the top. But this time, people have seen his record, and that's where, the populism probably will not have the same impact. So, for example, many of the battleground states we're talking about, which he took last time, was because solid support of the white working class. But this time, due to the pandemic, due to the layoffs, due to the unemployment, due to the continued suffering of people due to healthcare and lack of access to healthcare, these kind of issues mean that there are some who are likely to peel away. So Biden is going to peel away. Biden is promoting himself as the most pro-worker and pro-union president the U.S. has ever had. This rally he's doing even today in Pennsylvania on the day of voting itself shows, because that is the working class suburbs where he's trying to peel away voters from the traditional Trump base. And if he succeeds and along with the coalition of the the African Americans and the Latinos who tend to be pro-democratic generally, then he has got a pretty good chance of winning. So I think for Trump, really, he'll also try to take away some of the minority votes. Last time, Ramesh, Trump had only 8% of black voters for him and only 28% of Latinos. This time in Florida,
Professor Cholia, hold your thoughts. We'll just have to go momentarily across to our colleague Nick Harper, waiting in Delaware. Nick, if you are with us now as we speak, you are in Delaware now. Help us understand the mood in the Biden camp as we speak. We saw those visuals of Biden campaigning himself at Scranton, but how would you describe the mood in the Biden camp? Would you say they are anxious, upbeat, or nervous maybe?
Well, I think a little bit of all of those, a bit of nervous apprehension going in today. Certainly opinion polls seem to suggest that Joe Biden goes into an election day with a huge national lead, somewhere in the region of 7, 8, 9 points, depending on which poll you look at. It is closer in the battleground states, in particular Pennsylvania. It's very close there, just a few percentage points difference. So it's certainly a mood of upbeat optimism with those opinion polls suggesting that Joe Biden has something of a cushion. But of course, today is election day. We've seen nearly 100 million people vote before the day, but somewhere in the region of perhaps 50, 60 million people may vote during the day itself. So it's still very important for the Biden campaign to continue to push that message to supporters that they must go out and get out the vote and vote for their candidate. Obviously, there will be some anxiety considering that in 2016, all the polls suggested that Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton was on course for a win. That's what the polls suggested before Election Day. And then there was upset on the day itself with Donald Trump winning by quite a considerable margin in the end. So optimism, but certainly some nervousness within the campaign.
Nick, help our viewers understand the issues that are resonating most with voters in the US, generally speaking, and in Delaware in particular where you are. Could it be the economy, jobs, healthcare, or for that matter, COVID-19 pandemic?
All of those things, undoubtedly. I mean, this time round, the election has become about COVID-19. In many ways, it's become a referendum of Donald Trump's handling of the pandemic. But of course, we've also seen economic fallout with millions of Americans losing their jobs. We've seen economic output fall dramatically. The stock market has had a hit even within the last week or so, falling to have its worst week since March of this year. So those two things tied together, the pandemic and the economy, have become very central to this election. Of course, jobs in the economy and taxes, they're always important issues. They've just become much more critical this time round. And healthcare as well. You mentioned that one. It's certainly something that's on the mind of Democrats. Joe Biden warning that Republicans could potentially take away healthcare insurance of around 21 million Americans. There's a Supreme Court ruling next week. They'll be deciding on what to do with Obamacare, the act that was put in place in 2010. The Democrats are warning that if it goes the way of the Republicans, there could be millions of people who lose their healthcare insurance. So all of those issues certainly tied in this election to make considerable challenge.
All right. Okay. Well, let's try and reconnect with Nick in a bit from now. I think, Nick, can you hear us? All right, he's connected. Very, very briefly, 30 seconds.
I certainly can.
Yes, all right. Very, very briefly, 30 seconds. This whole euphoria about US early voting crossing a million mark, and this could be a worrisome factor for Trump. But from you, what we want to know is Biden a little happy man, considering the trends that we have seen in the last 48 hours, which has actually grabbed international headlines?
Well, I think so, absolutely. We have seen an overwhelming.
All right, we'll try and get back to Nick in a moment from now, Ramesh.
Indeed. Right, so it is just a few minutes past 9 p.m. India time. I want to go across to our guests one more time in the discussion, and to you, Puneet, in particular, before we let you go. Puneet, if you can, if you're still with us, yes, I can see you. Puneet, help our viewers understand, we're told that almost 100 million people have already voted through two means, a postal ballot or an in-person early voting. And we are given to understand that 60 or 70% of those early votes may have gone to the Democrats, so to speak. Why? Because they are postal ballots, and only 60 or maybe 40% was in-person early voting. Help our viewers understand who stands to benefit from all these early votes, and who stands to gain, either Trump or is it going to be Biden?
Well, I think it's anybody's good guess who's going to vote for who. But more importantly, in the mail-in ballot, we could suspect, and we have seen in the past, the Democrats suddenly coming up with ballots which were lost somewhere and then upsetting the election. We've seen that in California, and the congressional candidate who had won had come in for her orientation as a new congresswoman. But apparently then the ballots came up from somewhere. So the Democrats have had a history of cheating on the ballots. But to tell what I've been hearing from other viewers, yes, it is about COVID, and yes, it is about the economy. But at the same time, I think President Trump has done a phenomenal job in dealing with those two issues. And lastly, the Democrats are the ones who are preparing for this rioting and looting, because this is the part of their socialist agenda to take over with what they can't win by ethical elections. And most importantly, see the rallies. The amount of people turning up to President Trump's rallies tells you where the mood and the mood of the electorate is. And that's what you have to see. And apparently there is a way from CNN and the social media to really put down and depress the voters, the Republican voters, that, oh, this is already lost.
I just want to quickly ask you one question here. The mention of CNN. Yes. Puneet, just to add to that, why do you think, what are the compelling reasons for the certain sections of international media, and some of them you pointed out earlier also, going on the anti-Trump tirade, and Trump has been giving them back in equal measure? In USA, whatever media tries to set the narrative, does it actually impact the mind of electorate? Does it really make a difference?
Ma'am, if you keep telling constantly that a certain president is not doing right, you can see Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, MSNBC all the time saying President Trump cannot do anything good. Even when you have a governor of a state saying we thank President Trump, the California governor thanked President Trump, but never ever that'll play out. The Abraham Accord, which is one of the greatest achievement of this president last week between Israel and Middle East, the Gulf nation, is a huge success. But was it brought on the media? No. And Obama got an Oscar, in my opinion, for doing just lip service, whereas this president has truly worked towards creating the jobs, creating peace, and basically withdrawing America out of unnecessary wars.
All right, on that note, Puneet, thank you so much for joining us on this special broadcast. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Right, I'll ask all other guests to stay on for now, but time for a quick update. Now, debates are an integral part of the US presidential election. Take a look at some of the exchanges between Trump and Biden over the last several weeks. Right, we'll play out that package for you viewers momentarily, but you're watching a special broadcast here on DD India, and we'll get you all the news, views and analyses from India and the US going forward. But for now, let's quickly go across to the package that we're talking about.
With the United States already voting in the presidential elections, the world awaits to see who claims the title for 2020. Playing a crucial part in the elections, the debates have long played a key role in the way Americans choose their leaders. US President Donald Trump and Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden came face-to-face for their final debate before Election Day. The candidates who debated at Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee, sparred on topics that included the pandemic, climate change, China and corruption. Both the leaders argued vociferously over how they would deal with the coronavirus pandemic.
We have a vaccine that's coming. It's ready. It's going to be announced within weeks, and it's going to be delivered. We have Operation Warp Speed, which is the military is going to distribute the vaccine.
This is the same fellow who told you this is going to end by Easter last time. This is the same fellow who told you that, don't worry, we're going to end this by the summer. We're about to go into a dark winter, and he has no clear plan.
Arguing on gradual unlocking of the country, Trump said that the shutdown had caused depression, job loss, suicide, alcohol and drug use, as well as abuse.
We have no choice. We can't lock ourselves up in a basement like Joe does. He has the ability to lock himself up. I don't know. He's obviously made a lot of money someplace, but he has this thing about living in a basement. People can't do that. People are losing their jobs. They're committing suicide. There's depression, alcohol, drugs at a level that nobody's ever seen before.
Responding to Trump's "we are learning to live with the pandemic," Biden said, "We are learning to die with it."
He says that we're learning to live with it. People are learning to die with it. He said, don't worry, it's going to go away. Be gone by Easter. Don't worry, the warm weather. Don't worry, maybe inject bleach. He said he was kidding when he said that, but a lot of people thought it was serious. A whole range of things the president has said. Even today, he thinks we are in control.
Meanwhile, Trump repeated his accusations that Biden and his son Hunter engaged in unethical practices in China and Ukraine. Responding to the allegations cited against him, Biden refuted such claims and said that he never took a single penny whatsoever.
All of the emails, the horrible emails of the kind of money that you were raking in, you and your family. And Joe, you were vice president when some of this was happening, and it should have never happened. And I think you owe an explanation to the American people.
I have not taken a penny from any foreign source ever in my life. We learned that this president paid 50 times the tax in China, has a secret bank account with China, does business in China, and in fact is talking about me taking money. I have not taken a single penny from any country whatsoever.
At the end of the debate, when asked about what they would say at their hypothetical inaugural address to those who did not vote for them, Donald Trump used his time to say that Biden would cause an economic depression if elected and about his own economic record. On the other hand, Biden said he would tell people he was there to represent all of them and was going to give them hope. Bureau Report, DD India.
Time for a short break. Keep watching this special.
दिवाली अपनों के लिए जगह बनाओ, खुशियों के लिए जगह बढ़ाओ. LIC Housing Finance wishes you a happy and safe Diwali. Stay safe. Move on.
Insightful opinion. Incisive analysis. Intelligent conversation. Watch the best minds from India and the US decode the US election for you. Join us for a 14-hour live coverage of the race for the White House. From 6 p.m. on November 3, only on DD India, A Billion Voices.
इस दिवाली अपनों के लिए जगह बनाओ, खुशियों के लिए जगह बढ़ाओ. LIC Housing Finance wishes you a happy and safe Diwali. Stay safe. Move on.
Insightful opinion. All right, welcome back. You're watching a special broadcast here on DD India. We're calling it Race for the White House, and we'll get you all the news, views, and updates from the US going forward as well. Time to welcome Dhruv Jaishankar on this special broadcast. Welcome, Dhruv. And we also have with us our other guests, Ambassador Arun K. Singh, Professor W.P.S. Sidhu, Preeti Upala, Professor K.P. Vijay Lakshmi, and Professor Sriram Cholia as well. Thank you all for joining us and staying on this special broadcast. If I can start with you, Dhruv, the polling has continued for the last couple of hours now. Based on the early trends, what's the sense you are getting from where you are, your vantage, your perspective on the elections so far?
Well, this year has been quite unusual in that we've seen much higher rates of early voting over the past few days and weeks than we have on election day itself. Traditionally in the US, unlike in India, you have elections on one day. And so in some ways, the voter turnout on election day matters somewhat less than in previous elections. About 93 million votes were cast as of 2 days ago. So that's roughly 70% of the total votes that were cast in 2016, roughly 2/3 of what is expected this time around. So in some ways, the voting on election day this year will matter somewhat less.
And talking about the issues at play here, Dhruv, very quickly, your thoughts on the issues that will determine the course of the polling over the next several hours. From your perspective, is it going to be the economy, jobs, healthcare, or is it going to be COVID-19 pandemic in particular, or other domestic issues such as race and immigration, or for that matter, gun laws?
Well, obviously a combination of the above. There is pretty consistent polling data showing what voters care about most. The economy is traditionally very high up there and often the number one thing. The coronavirus pandemic seems to have had an effect. So to give one example, roughly 55% of Americans believe that the President Trump is doing a good job with the economy, but only 40% believe that he's done a good job in handling the coronavirus pandemic. And overall, his approval rating is about 40.
I want to quickly get in Preeti's view also here, and we will go to subsequently to Professor Chawla and Ambassador Singh as well. Preeti, in these elections, the role of Indian diaspora has also been hugely talked about, especially because of the Kamala Harris factor. And I did ask you that question earlier, you being the Indian origin American entrepreneur there. Indian diaspora now, will it make or mar? Many would say will make a huge difference in these US elections, Preeti. But you being an Indian origin American there, is it just a rhetoric, or perhaps this time there has been an all-out effort from both camps to woo the Indian diaspora significantly?
Well, definitely we can see from the Trump administration an out wooing, and they had put out that incredible commercial that was showcasing the friendship between India and the US and Prime Minister Modi and the president. So I think the diaspora is definitely very split. I mean, it's usually 20-80 going to the Democrats. However, I think the recent stance of the Democratic Party towards internal matters in India have had a huge effect on the diaspora right here, and there's a lot of people moving center, moving right, even who are not quite thrilled with what a Biden administration or what a Harris administration even would mean for the Indian American alliance. And it's interesting to note that in the past few weeks we've had these amazing ministerial meetings, the 2+2, the Quad. And all of those formalized, summits between the U.S. and India to strengthen our global alliance and the defense cooperation and so on, which becomes incredibly important. I think what I like about the current administration is their focus on foreign policy, because what I've noticed here in America is that they're way too insular. They only care about, domestic issues. Like, it seems like abortion is like the number one issue here. And I think for a superpower, I think it should be tilting more towards foreign policy and the geopolitical the game that's going on. So I do think, although our diaspora is quite tiny, obviously they have a lot of influence when it comes to backing candidates.
In fact, you talked about
so
abortion, you have climate change, economic inequality, immigration, race and ethnic inequality, gun policy, so much and so forth, Ramesh. But the question is that Professor Chawla, before I hand it over to my colleague Ramesh, Professor Chawla, many would say that Republicans were trying to lead on the economy and Democrats took an advantage on climate and healthcare narratives. And many would also say that these debates did not really focus on the policy matter. They were damp and they were more vitriolic and personal attacks in nature. Professor Chawla, briefly, please.
The conservative Republicans, and on almost all issues. For example, Trump stood for more for evangelical Christians, and he had more of a religious appeal. Trump was talking about sustaining fracking in the oil and fossil fuel industry, and on the other hand, the Democrats, especially more left of Biden, were talking about issues of redistribution and climate change. A lot of young people, young voters who have come in for the first time and who had not voted in 2016, apparently many of them, the ones with college degrees, are voting for Biden, irrespective of race, because they feel that they are going to inherit the planet. And for them, it's a raw deal because Trump pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. And many of them also are not very religious. So if you look at it that way, there is the classic left versus right. But you are correct that it has been in many ways overshadowed by the personality, especially of Trump, because, he has a way of trying to impose himself on the entire scene. He's been the showman forever. So that sense, there is also a clear distinction between Biden, who's mild and sober and tends to be understated. And on the other hand, Trump, is very always bragging about his achievements and larger than life, and always projecting a kind of image of America that was going backwards, but he's pulled it out and he's now taking it up. He's made it great. So I think the hyperbole is there, but if you go beneath it, there is a clear distinction between left and right, and I think people have to choose.
Yes.
Right. Professor Cholia, I'll come back to you momentarily, but if I can bring my other guests back in the discussion, Ambassador Singh, Professor Sidhu and Professor Vijayalakshmi. Starting with you, Professor Sidhu. Now, talking about a Trump 2.0 versus Biden in the White House, how do you think the two will fare on issues such as Russia, China, Iran, the Indo-Pacific, Afghanistan, West Asia, or Middle East, as it's spoken in the US? Give our viewers a sense of the weaknesses and strengths of a Trump 2.0 as compared to a Biden in the White House.
Well, I think there's a more fundamental question here, right? Both the US, both the parties recognize that this is a moment of transition for the US, right? And how they're going to engage with the emerging world order is going to be crucial. In that context, what you see from the Republicans as represented by Trump is really going back to the past, to fossil fuel, more traditional linkages with some of the Middle East, looking, with the exception of Russia, which seems to be very particularly personally driven, to China, etc. as well. Whereas the Democrats are clearly kind of moving towards a new world order. But at a pace which is managed and controlled by the US. But it's quite clear that both of them are looking to move back out of leading responsibility worldwide. For President Trump, it's more particular that he wants to be an anti-war president in almost every sense of the word. And I think that's likely to continue unless there's a direct attack on the homeland, which is something that no president can stand up to. I think on all the areas that you've talked about, there's going to be similarities in the approach to China. You will see two distinctions, I think, between a Biden and a Trump administration in the Middle East, and that is really towards Iran. You might well see a movement back towards the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. You'll see perhaps a much more stronger hard line on Russia. But I think when you come to the Indo-Pacific, and particularly to India, you're likely to see much more continuity because the approach to India is truly bipartisan. That is the one element I think that we need to recognize. And there's a growing recognition of the role that India is going to play in the broader scheme globally, and therefore, irrespective of what administration is here, it's likely to continue to engage with India. The only difference is really going to be on the pace of it.
Absolutely. Okay. And Professor Vijayalakshmi, how do you see Trump's foreign policy legacy, and what might a Biden in the White House mean for countries around the world, including India?
Is that to me?
Yes, to you, Professor Vijayalakshmi.
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Is it to me?
Yes,
yes, Professor Vijayalakshmi, please go ahead. That question was for you. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, well, let me add to what Professor Sidhu has just commented. I think there have been stark differences, but there are some goals which I see a lot of continuity. One is the limited troop deployments in the Middle East, in Afghanistan. These are going to continue. And there's been a discussion, Charles Kupchan's book talks about return to isolationism or more selective engagement. And I think overall, you're going to see an America which is not really interested in interfering in all the hotspots around the world or be the policeman of the world. And I think, therefore, you're going to see there will be some retrenchment on the Middle East for certain, but on Afghanistan, as you know, the talks are going on. So that's of great interest to India. And that is one of the crucial hotspots that we will be keeping a strong eye on. But on also the other thing, the stand on China, I think the Trump administration has always maintained that go to it alone or go, sledgehammer tactics. And in this, the trade sanctions and tariffs were the precursor to a more stringent and stronger, harsher, even bilateral strategy between America and China. And there is across the government, pan-American recognition of the China threat. And therefore, the Biden administration is not going to see a more conciliatory approach as has been touted. I think there will be a cold confrontation that will continue. It may not be a cold war, but however, there will be hawkish sentiment that Biden administration. What he has outlined is that there will be a more united front. Maybe he will follow more alliance patterns and bring more allies to the table, but certainly the change is not going to be about becoming soft on China. So there's another continuity there. And that, of course, will interest India. And on Indo-Pacific, and as has been said by so many of your panelists, and I see, Dhruva also there, and we discussed this, Dhruva, some time ago, there is a great deal of work that has been put in from the time of Obama's Asia pivot policy on what could be the possible contours of a new and inclusive Indo-Pacific that can benefit the region and also the role of external powers. And this has yielded some fruit with the current U.S. strategy on Indo-Pacific. And I think from 2018 to 2020, you're seeing a series of acts which the Trump administration has really put out. And the last visit by Secretary Pompeo and Secretary Esper, the 2+2 meeting, where India has signed the final foundational agreement of Becca, is a testimony to the level of sustained dialogue and consultation and importance given to strategic partnership. And I don't think that's going to change, because this started with DTTI, which was under Ashton Carter during Obama administration. It continues. And this is because the geopolitical interests of both India and China, which Preeti was talking about a little while ago.
All right.
I would argue that these interests continue to animate international landscape. And therefore, US and India are on a pathway to being much more congruent and more convergences on the issue of Indo-Pacific. And their joint statements certainly help us understand that this is not a one-off or, just something, one administration does on either side, but it is a well thought out policy. And given the, latest China-India border clashes that you're seeing in, for the last so many months, this has tremendous significance. Some analysts, and I do think that there's some point there, have argued that China has in fact
made a very interesting point, because ma'am, you're specifically talking about Biden versus Trump position on China. Ramesh, Biden says, and I quote, China should be held accountable for unfair environment and trade practices, but instead of unilateral tariffs, he has proposed an international coalition with other democracies that China can't afford to ignore. But this sounds extremely vague, and I'm going to quickly take a reaction later from Ambassador Singh. But before that, I think we're getting some live action, live ground reportage. William is with us again, and William Denzilo is joining us once again live all the way from Wisconsin, which happens to be one of the epicenters. William, over to you. Just describe the scene behind you, and how is the morning shaping up over there? Because we have seen Biden a couple of times right now as we speak. We don't know what Trump is doing, but Biden is trying to reach out and engage with the voters out there in his own constituency.
That's absolutely right. Just for a little bit of context, perhaps. So, as of this weekend, it's being reported, or it's being, according to some analysts, that more than half of Wisconsin's registered voters have already cast their ballots early before November 3rd, Election Day, here in the United States. That means through either mail-in ballots or through those early votes that opened at around October 20th here in Wisconsin. However, what we are seeing here in Milwaukee, where I'm currently at, we're at a polling station right in the city. This is the biggest city in the state of Wisconsin. What we saw is that when polls opened at 7 a.m., there were already long lines going down the block here, despite the fact that so many people, a record amount of people in the state, have already voted early. Now, we've spoken to some voters. They say that for some, it's the tradition of it. They've always voted on November 3rd in the United States. Pandemic or not, they will do so again. Another reason that some people are heading to the polls on November 3rd and not voting early is because the Supreme Court in the US made that decision, which means that all absentee ballots must be processed and delivered by 8 p.m. November 3rd. Any votes that were cast through the mail that come after that will not be processed.
Any trends that you're picking up, Williams? Any trends? And what is the buzz in the in media out there, in media out there in US? What's the buzz? What's the trend that you're catching up with?
Well, here in Milwaukee, the electoral commission is bipartisan, which means that we don't get a sense from them as to which way people in Wisconsin are voting. What we can, though, look at is some of the polls that have come out in recent days. According to a New York Times Siena poll that came out just a few days ago, that suggested that Joe Biden here in the state of Wisconsin enjoyed around an 11-point lead over President Donald Trump. However, President Trump was here in Wisconsin yesterday in one of his last campaign rallies before Election Day began in earnest. He said that the polls were very wrong in 2016. He is certainly hoping that they are wrong again this time around. And that's really a trend we're seeing across much of the United States in a number of these swing states, the likes of Pennsylvania, the likes of Michigan, here in Wisconsin. This Rust Belt, as they mention in the United States, seems to suggest, according to the polls, that former Vice President Joe Biden enjoys a lead in these particular battleground states. But of course, again, as we saw in 2016, how wrong those polls proved to be. The message from Donald Trump is he's hoping those polls are wrong again.
Indeed. And William, very quickly, if you can take a step back and look at the region, as a whole, you are in the Rust Belt. We're talking about Wisconsin, Michigan. If you also look across to the south, Florida, and also all the way up to Pennsylvania, could it all boil down to either or Florida or Pennsylvania, because that could be the crucial swing states that could make or mar the election for Trump?
That's absolutely right, of course, with them bringing a huge amount of these electoral college votes. And really the message from analysts and those that look at these polls, they suggest that if the president was to lose the likes of Florida or Pennsylvania, his path to the presidency gets very small indeed. They're seen as absolutely crucial for the president if he wants to keep hold of the keys to the White House. Of course, there are a number of other states that the Democrats now feel they might have a shot in, states like Georgia, states like Arizona, even the likes of Texas, where there's been heavy campaigning as far as the Democrats are involved, Ohio as well, to name another. So the hope is for Democrats is that not only can they take some of the states that they perhaps surprised many analysts by losing in 2016, the likes of Wisconsin, their hopes is that they can reclaim those, to turn those blue, and they can even make some inroads into some predominantly and historically Republican states, such as those including Georgia and Texas. But of course, the message from President Trump himself is that he believes that the exact opposite will occur. He believes that he's making up ground in the likes of Pennsylvania, in the likes of Florida, and that they'll certainly stay true and stay Republican as far as he's concerned.
All right, on that note, William, thank you so much for joining us again on this special broadcast. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time once again. Right, let's continue our discussion here on this special broadcast. We still have with us Ambassador Arun K. Singh, Professor W.P.S. Sidhu, Professor K.P. Vijay Lakshmi, Dhruv Jaishankar, Preeti Uppala, and Professor Sriram Cholia. If I can come to you, Dhruv, very quickly. Now, let's talk a bit about from India's perspective. What is in it for India in terms of trade, terrorism, technology, especially the Indian-American community and the Indians living and working in the US in terms of immigration, visa issues, and so on and so forth?
previously, I think this election is very important for India, but for two reasons. One, of course, this is India's most important bilateral relationship, no matter how you cut it. And if you take the totality of the relationship, which encompasses the, from security, counterterrorism, to economics, trade, education, energy, take almost any facet of public policy today, and from an Indian point of view is important, and therefore the election outcome matters for that reason. But the second reason, I think, is less to do with India per se. Both candidates have broadly said that they intend to improve the partnership with India. This is, India does not feature prominently in this election, which is probably a good thing. But what will matter, as you've alluded to in previous questions, is really how the US approaches China, how it approaches Afghanistan and Pakistan, approaches West Asia, Russia, and as well as broader issues of trade, immigration, and openness. And on these, on many of those issues, you have seen differences between the Trump administration's approach and the Biden campaign's platform. And so for these reasons, I think that will be important to monitor in the years.
Yes.
In
I want to take that thought
ahead.
I want to take that thought to Ambassador Singh. We're very, very, in fact, honored to have him with us on special broadcast, Ambassador Singh. Respective positions of Trump and Biden camp on China in particular, Pakistan in particular, especially when Biden says that he's going to increase the engagements with NATO and have better relationships with allies. The statements that he has made on China are pretty vague in nature. But Ambassador Singh, whatever foreign policy templates they both are trying to manufacture, they tried to manufacture during their campaigning period, does it really make a big difference when it comes to the voting pattern, when it comes to the results per se? Because I remember I was listening to Ambassador Mohan in our earlier chunk in our earlier broadcast. He said that for an average American Joe, it doesn't really matter how America relationship really pans out with the rest of the world when it comes to elections. Would you agree with that?
As we discussed earlier, much of the focus for the voters has been on domestic issues.
Yeah.
And in fact, in the main debates, the two debates that took place between President Trump and Vice President Biden, the entire focus was essentially on domestic issues. But that having been said, foreign policy issues remain important because the decisions that the US takes impacts on everyone. It impacts on us. And there have been some divergences and some convergence between what Trump has been saying and what Joe Biden has been advocating. For example, Trump has been speaking of America first and talking about allies being a drain on the United States and that every country should look after its own interests and only its own interests. Whereas Joe Biden has been talking about revitalizing the relationship with allies and partners, arguing that a stronger alliance and partner relationship will make the US more effective in dealing with the many challenges, including from China. For example, if the US really wants to meet the economic, technological, and military challenge from China, it needs to get its allies and partners, including the Europeans, on a common position on how to respond to China. Because the Europeans take a different position in responding to China as they have been doing so far, looking just at the economic opportunity in China rather than the strategic and technological challenge from China, then the US impact is going to be limited. And then on China itself, I think there is a broad convergence in the US establishment that the earlier policy of engagement with China in the hope that engagement would lead to political and economic liberalization in China, China would accept the norms of international conduct, has been belied, especially under President Xi. And China is now trying to set its own rules and norms for international conduct, which is a challenge to the United States. Therefore, across the board, there is a sense that the Chinese challenge has to be met. And I think the Biden administration would do exactly that, although they may see opportunity for cooperation with China in dealing with climate change issues. On Russia, President Trump wanted to move positively with Russia, but he was not able to because there was a sense that Russia had intervened in 2016 through social media to help him in the elections against Hillary Clinton. And therefore, the US Congress and the wider establishment in the US tried to prevent him from moving positively with Russia. Now, Joe Biden himself, because of this legacy, will have a harsher approach towards Russia, but he'll be less constrained if he wants to move positively with Russia, especially, for example, on arms control issues. And again on Pakistan, President Trump started by being very hardline, stopping assistance to Pakistan, but then he's wanted to use Pakistan in the context of the dialogue and moving forward with Taliban. And Joe Biden, in the statement that he put out on 15th August, statement to the Indian American community and to the people of India on our Independence Day, said that his administration would take a very strong line against cross-border terrorism and would also be mindful of India's interest in terms of the other challenges India is facing on the border. But in terms of Afghanistan, Joe Biden, as vice president, had also pushed for US withdrawal from Afghanistan because there is a fatigue in the US social system, society, and political system from extensive and extended engagement abroad, and they want to draw down to that on that. So there would be some similarity. So I would say that there is still a lack of clarity on what a Trump 2.0 would look like, because he would not be looking at re-election. He would be looking at a legacy, and we have to see how. And many of his policies have been determined by his preferences rather than an interagency and administration process moving its way up. Whereas Joe Biden administration will try and revive a more traditional foreign policy, much like at the time of Obama, with emphasis on alliances, emphasis on democracy, and that would be his way forward.
Absolutely. I'll request all our guests to stay on for a bit more on this last segment of this special broadcast for this particular segment. Let's take a moment to go back to our colleague Anil Thomas in the news pit and take a look at the US presidential elections and the battleground states in particular. Which are those states we get an early projections on, and what are the reasons for the delay in projections? Over to you, Anil.
Well, thank you, Ramesh and Sakal, once again. You know, election nights or election days are generally days that are tense moments and moments for closure. However, this particular election is a different game altogether because this particular elections is ending on a disturbing note. When I say disturbing note, what I mean is there is a long drawn, legal battle that could be in store once this election results are announced. But let's now take a look at certain things. What's the US presidential election all about? 538 electoral college votes. What's the magic number that both the candidates are looking for? That's 270. Any candidate that gets about 270 is going to be the winner. Is it going to be Joe Biden or is it going to be Donald Trump who's going to walk away with 270 plus? How does one arrive at this magic number? There are 12 battleground states in this particular election. It starts off with Texas, that's got the maximum 38 votes, Florida 29, Pennsylvania 20. That's where both the candidates campaigned in that last phase. Ohio 18, Georgia and Michigan both having 16 electoral college votes. But the most important thing, Florida. This is the important state that both candidates will be looking at. Let me finish the 12 states for you here. North Carolina 15, Arizona 11, Wisconsin 10, Minnesota 10, Nevada and Ohio having 6 seats. These are the 12 battleground states. This is where the battle is going to be, and this is where it's going to be played out big. Which are the 6 states that's going to have a tight contest? It's going to start with Arizona, Florida, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin and North Carolina. If Trump manages to get Florida and Pennsylvania, he's got 49 votes there, then Biden has to look for Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina to compensate that loss if he loses both these particular states. So it's going to be crucial on how these particular things are going to, wound up. When you look at the 2016 campaign for Trump, which were the important states that he managed to win? Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Ohio. The 6 states that helped him catch Hillary Trump and the Democrats, clearly offside in that particular battle. In this particular elections, November 3rd, why there could be a delay? November 3rd, that's tomorrow. These are the seats, or these are the states from where we could get the numbers early. Texas, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, Minnesota, and Nevada. These are the 7 states from where early numbers could come in, early projections could come in. Florida, once again, is the state to look out for because Florida is going to have 29 seats, and any US president right from 1964 till 2016, no president has managed to lose this particular state and hold power. So this is a very crucial state to win, Florida, and this is going to be where all the battle is. Now, projections that could be delayed beyond November 3rd. Pennsylvania, 20 seats. Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ohio. The 5 states where the vote count or the projections could come much later, and this could be crucial in this particular elections because these delayed announcements, these delayed projections coming in as late as Thursday and Friday could be crucial in this particular election and this particular projections when it comes to the biggest swing state. When I say is Florida, why is it a biggest swing state? Because it's sharply politically divided, number one. The second point that one looks at, it swings between major political parties. It swings either Democrats, it swings Republican. There's been a swing every 8 years that you've seen. Let's now take a look at that Florida battleground state. 1996, it went with Democrats won at that point of time. Bill Clinton winning that seat in 1996. Shifted over to the Republicans 2000, 2004, George W. Bush bagging that seat again, Florida. 2008, 2012, Barack Obama, then Democrats once again capturing that seat of Florida. 2016, Trump surprising Hillary Clinton, taking that particular seat of Florida there once again. So this is why Florida is very crucial, and this is why the battle is going to be, those crucial votes there matter. And Florida is important because every president that wins the election in Florida has gone to win on the election. So it's a crucial state, and both candidates will be looking to pocket Florida. 2020, which is the tipping state, a state that is very important if things go down to the wire, Pennsylvania. The vote count here is not going to be early because it's going to begin only on election day. So the vote count is going to be late, and this particular elections could all boil down to this particular tipping state. The final results and projections will not be possible tonight. That means on November 3rd, you got to wait till Friday for Pennsylvania results to come. That's why it's going to be a tipping state. It's just got 20 votes, but it's going to play a crucial state. Why is there a delay in projections? Many are left confused on why is there a delay in projection. Each state has its own date for starting in-person or mail-in voting. That is, when you start the whole process. Let's take a look at Arizona. Arizona, the mail-in voting began on October 7th. Very early, it began there, and it closed on election day, that it closes today. But the counting here began on October 20th. That's why, you are able to get a trend, you are able to get a projection on this particular state when it comes to Arizona. Now, let's shift over to another state, Ohio. The mail-in voting started here on the 6th of October, and it's allowed till the 13th of November. When I say 13th of November, there is a catch here. But you must be postmarked by November 2nd. So you got to mark it on November 2nd. The voting can take place till November 13th. Ohio, the counting starts on November 3rd. These are the reasons why, you would not get those projections, you would not get those numbers pretty early. The numbers could be pretty late, and that's where the projections, and that's where there's going to be, Pennsylvania, that's going to play a crucial role here. Now, this particular Ohio state will take 3 days to count, hence there's going to be a delay when it comes to projections. If you're looking at Tuesday, the results or the projections could be as late as Friday coming in from Ohio. Now, take a look at some possible outcomes. Florida and Pennsylvania, as I put it together, 29-20, that's 49 votes or 49 electoral votes going for Trump. This could be crucial if Trump manages to hold on to these two particular states, because these two states are very important. Both the candidates campaigned in their last phase in Pennsylvania. They spend a lot of time, and they both are looking at what does Biden have to do if Florida and Pennsylvania go that way. Biden will have to win Michigan, Arizona, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and do well in so many other states. So that's going to be, the odds stacked against Biden. But the way things are, the way projections are, things are looking good for Biden, and this could not be a position that we are looking at. What happened in the 2016 elections? 227 for Hillary Clinton, that's Democrat backing 226 votes, while Trump, the surprise package, the man who came from behind, the man who stole the thunder in 2016, managing to get 304 electoral votes. This time around, also when it comes to campaigning spends, campaigning spends, there is a smashing new record that's been created, 6.6 billion. This is the total campaigning that's the campaigning spend from both the candidates this time around. This is just 2 more million what was spent in 2016, that were 4.6 billion. So number crunching, when it comes to number crunching and number spend or money being spent in this particular elections, 6.6 billion US dollars being spent in this particular election. So it's going to be, the mother of all battles, but, we still have to wait and watch how things pan out. But, in this election, there is a simple saying that one needs to follow. Ignore the noise, keep your poise. I think we'll all keep our fingers crossed and hope that, America decides while the world watches, but it's going to be one crucial elections where, there is going to be the winner takes it all. Back to you, Ramesh and Sakal.
Anil, I mean, that touch of humor and those lines coming from Anil Thomas, wait seems to be unprecedented. The excitement seems to be more than unprecedented. In 2016, Trump sprung up a big surprise. Could it be Biden this time, repeating what Trump did in 2016?
Indeed.
Not speculating here. We're going to take a short break, but wait for the White House. Our special programming, a rolling reportage continues on your channel. DD India, Billion Voices. A short break. Don't go away.
दिवाली अपनों के लिए जगह बनाओ, खुशियों के लिए जगह बढ़ाओ. LIC Housing Finance wishes you a happy and safe Diwali. Stay safe, move on.
Insightful opinion. Incisive analysis. Intelligent conversation. Watch the best minds from India and the US decode the US election for you. Join us for a 14-hour live coverage of the race for the White House. From 6 p.m. on November 3, only on DD India, A Billion Voices.
As the day unfolds and news and events take shape, we get you complete coverage of every news breaking in, tracking new developments as they happen. Midday Prime English, Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. on DD News and DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching the special broadcast here on DD India. We're calling it the race for the White House. And we still have with us 6 very special guests. Ambassador Arun K. Singh, Professor W.P.S. Sidhu, Professor Sriram Cholia, Professor K.P. Vijay Lakshmi, Preeti Uppala and Dhruv Jaishankar. But we have just about 10 minutes left on this segment of the broadcast. So if you can go across to all our guests one last time on this discussion. And if I can start with you, Ambassador Singh, your wish list from either a Trump 2.0 or a Biden. And by the way, if you want to have the bragging rights of telling us, see, I told you so, now is the time for you to stick your neck out and say who's winning. Ambassador Singh.
So I'm going to skip the second part about who's winning.
Spoken like a true diplomat. I'm not surprised at all.
But in terms of what I'd wish for, I'd like whoever wins to continue to work for strengthening the India-US relationship. I think it's important for India because given the challenges we face, including in our neighborhood, a stronger relationship with the United States would be helpful to us in meeting those challenges. And I think for the United States also, the kind of world it is facing, it has already said that it is now in an era of great power rivalry. It sees a major challenge emerging from China, the economic, technological, military. And in that process, clearly India would be an important partner for the US. So I would like to see the US focusing even more on strengthening the economic and other dimensions of its relationship with India.
Professor Sidhu, your take, will Trump be lucky this time around or it could be a different game altogether?
Well, again, I think in Americanism, I'm also going to take the fifth, as it's called, and hold forward, hold back my views on that. I think the important thing is that, the Americans are going to vote for who they think is going to be best for them and for the United States, right? I think that seems to be the most obvious kind of approach that's going to come through. And it's quite clear that a large part of the country, not all of it, a large part of the country is really exhausted by the divide. And so if they're going to see somebody who's more of a uniter rather than somebody who's going to be very, very much deliberately a divider, I think that's going to be the important driver, in my opinion, I think, for the electorate, and seems to have been the case already. Given that people are, spending so much time to vote, even during COVID-19 and terrible weather, among others. And I think a United States which is at ease with itself domestically is also, in my opinion, I think going to be far more conducive for relationships with India, even though US-India relations are on a particular trajectory which are likely to continue. The challenge for India really is to be prepared for either a Trump 2.0 or a Biden, if you like, 1.5 in some ways going forward as well. It cannot be seen to be, very much partisan in any one
Indeed,
camp
point taken, Professor
other.
Sidhu. If I can bring in Dhruv Jaishankar. Dhruv, last thoughts very quickly, your wish list and who do you think is ahead if you want to stick your neck out and say it? in so many words?
Well, I'm not going to do any projections, but I think with that in mind, I think the polls are quite clearly indicating that Joe Biden is favored. But a number of things can happen, and I think three things to look out for in the next few hours and day. One is, the accuracy of the polling. Two, the possibility of Trump winning by small margins in several of the swing states, enough to give him the requisite votes. And then the third possibility, of course, is the voter turnout and the manner in which ballots are accepted and counted, and whether that will make a difference in the outcome.
Okay.
So I think those are just some things to keep in mind as the results start rolling in a few hours' time. And broadly on the India-US relationship, I think India is actually not very badly positioned for many other countries where, who depend upon the United States for their alliance relationships or are significantly more dependent upon it for trading relations, such as Canada or Mexico.
All
this
right,
is a much
Dhruv,
more
we're really
important
running short of time. Preview, Pala, 10-15 seconds. Your take, quickly.
Look, the two greatest threats that we face in the world today are a rising imperialistic China and the threat of radical Islamic terrorism. So the US administration that can counter both of them, the best is going to be better for the country. It's going to be better for the world. I've always said that the next half century is going to be one where the India and the US relationship is going to be the most important moving forward. So I just hope that we get the right administration for that. My only prediction is that this could possibly become a contested election. So one, either Trump wins in a landslide, or two, he doesn't, but then it does get contested and ends up in the Supreme Court, which is where it will be decided judicially.
Fair point taken,
in which
Preeti.
case
And
he actually
one
has
last
the
round of discussion, Professor Sriram Cholia and Professor Vijayalakshmi. You first, Professor Cholia, and then Professor Vijayalakshmi. Very quickly, please.
A economic or a health crisis. There's a crisis of institutions, trust in institutions, from the local, county election boards all the way up to the Supreme Court. People are raising aspersions, and the media is in the question. So American democracy is on the line. This is not a referendum on coronavirus or on populism. Ultimately, it's about the world's oldest democracy. Our wish as the largest democracy is that they can sort these issues and the institutional faith comes back and America emerges stronger, if not now, at least in 4 more years.
Right. And the last word of the lady on this panel, Professor Vijayalakshmi, very quickly, your thoughts.
Well, I think there are 3 important things, which are very quickly. How to sync India-US's bilateral, regional and global interests and continuing that journey on a positive trajectory. That would be my first wish. And I think we are very much capable because we've set up the mechanisms and we should be moving towards that despite the changes or not in the administration. But for the US itself, I think there's one very small but an important fact that we've not discussed this evening, and that is the shy Trump voter. The Trafalgar group and the Susquehanna group have constantly talked about a submerger voter theory, and therefore they may come out and they may have a tremendous impact, and therefore we should look out for that. But I think the most important thing is that the social contract that has been the American, let's say the basis for America's soft power and credibility is online as well. And I agree that the democracy referendum on America's democracy is also about its soft power credibility, both in terms of violence and non-violence, etc., etc. I think, though, it will be a winner will come out of this election.
Yes, it's pulsating excitement, undoubtedly. The discussions and analysis will continue on the side of the globe as well. But thank you very much, our distinguished panelists, for being with us on this very, very special edition of A Raid for White House. And with that, it's a wrap-up of this segment. But the special broadcast continues here on DD India with our colleagues Gautam and Marklin joining you to take this forward. Ramesh?
Right. And don't forget a hashtag, Raise for White House. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Namaskar.
हर दिन